Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are going over all of the Modern Horizons 3 red cards. As always, we've got Yanks on the call. How you doing, Yanks?
Good. How about you?
Good. Are you excited to see how red removal lines up with the booties of all the other colors?
Yeah, it's always an important part of looking at a set for limited. Is it 3 damage? Is it 4 damage? Instant speed? How much does it cost? It's always critical.
Yep, absolutely. So let's go ahead and start with Aether Revolt. Oh, quick note, if you guys missed our introduction to Modern Horizons 3 or any of the other colors, it's all already up, so make sure you guys go check them out. The introduction, we go over all the draftable archetypes and the returning mechanics and everything you can expect to find in this set, and it will help you with the ratings here because we talked a lot about these mechanics and such. So, Aether Revolt, we have 4 mana for an enchantment with Revolt. As long as a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +2. Whenever you get 1 or more energy, Aether Revolt deals that much damage to any target. So energy is one of the higher returning mechanics that you'll see in the set, so this is definitely an archetype.
Yeah, energy is number one in terms of out of these 74 returning mechanics, a lot of which appear just once. For example, Revolt. Energy, however, appears on 35 cards.
Yes, many cards. So I expect this to be an archetype. However, I don't expect it to be good in the average deck, which is sort of how we rate these cards. So I would say this is a split rating. But I think there will be lots of decks that can trigger this a fair number of times. That's a little tough. It's always difficult to know how well a synergy this specific will come together, because other types of things don't really help it like it would with other things. Like there are like +1/+1 counters, for example. There are cards that will help with that without necessarily being designed that way. This is a little bit more specific.
What I like about this card is it fits really nicely in those energy decks because it's an energy payoff that doesn't require you to spend energy.
Yes.
So like every energy you get basically is doing double duty, and if you have this out because you're getting the trigger plus you then have it to spend on your other payoffs.
It's so difficult though, because if a permanent didn't leave the battlefield this turn, you're not getting the thing. You're only getting the energy.
You're still dealing damage, you're just not getting the +2.
Yeah. It just
I mean, most energy generators are 2 or 3. You don't see a lot of 1 energy generators unless they're recurring, so you're getting a lot of shocks, theoretically.
yeah, a lot is.
Yeah, it's depending on your deck, of course.
Yeah, and a lot of them might not be worth running. Like if you're playing this and you're running a bunch of bad energy things without other payoffs, I mean that just feels weird to
Oh
me.
yeah, you're not. Yeah, it's not enough to be in a deck without. You're not already generating a bunch of energy.
So it is tough to set up to be perfect, and it doesn't do anything on its own, which is what makes me hesitant. Like if it came into play and gave you 1 or 2 energy and triggered itself, even just the once, even just a small amount, I would be very happy with this card. But as it stands, I'm a little hesitant, and I think even in mild synergy decks, I would probably still be too hesitant to run this, as it does nothing on its own.
Yeah, I think if I have a handful of energy generators, I'm probably happy with this because I feel like I only need to trigger this twice to be happy with the card. So
You
probably
need to
getting
get
a two for
2 shocks out of it.
there's a reasonable chance you're getting a 2 for 1. I mean, yeah, I'm hoping one of them is more than a shock and is a bolt, but
So
um,
you would get a shock and a bolt for.
for 1 card and 4 mana, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's enough for me. I would need a more than a handful. So I'm going to give it a split rating. I'm going to say it is a 1 and a. I can play a 7, I think, in the really strong energy decks.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a split because there are just decks that will never play this card. Um,
Most of them.
so I'm with you on the 1. I might be a little, maybe like 7.5. I don't think we're actually that far off on the card.
Well, I think where we are far off is that even in some energy decks, you would run this and think it's a 7. I would not run this, and I think it's like a 4 or a 5. I think that
Yeah,
7 is like where I think it's like ceiling is, and I think that I will like that in less decks than you.
that's fair. I do think I'm more likely to play this than you. I don't know if I would say I think it's a 7 in those decks, but I'm happy enough to put this in some decks where I think it'll be like a 5.5 or a 6.
Yeah. And I think that the idea is just that, like, we both agree that it has a powerful
Yep.
ceiling. It is just where we are happy for that to be is, I think, a bit drastically different. So this is a tough card to start off the color with.
Also, fun trivia note on this card. It is now either the 21st or 22nd card to have the same name as a Magic set.
Oh,
The
interesting.
reason it's either is because it depends on whether or not you count Cold Snap, because the card is 2 words, but the set is 1 word.
That is fun trivia. All right, next up we have the Amped Raptor, 2 mana for a 2/1 first striker. When it ETBs, you get 2 energy. And then, if you cast it from your hand, you get to exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a non-land card. You may cast that card by paying energy equal to the amount of its mana cost instead of paying its mana cost. This is actually an interesting card. I did get to see this card in action this past week, and it worked really well in a constructive, cohesive deck. So I'm interested to see what it can do for limited.
Yeah, and it's got a pretty high floor, just as a 2 mana 2/1 first striker that gives you some energy, even if you brick on the ability.
Yeah, it was actually, I think, opposite, right? So when I played it in Constructed, we wanted to play it very late, and we were happy to
Yeah.
get the trigger here, versus in, I think, in a limited environment, we're happy to just have a 2/1 first striker for 2 that gives you energy to enable the rest of your things. You're not, like, going to be triggering the second clause as much. But if you draw it late, that's great. You get to do that as well. But I think more often than not, we're just casting this and are pretty happy about it on 2, right?
Yeah, but as long as you have some energy generation, it's nice that it's a 2 drop that you might be happy to play on turn 9.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime it scales up is good. So rating wise, I like this card a lot in the energy deck, even in a non-energy deck. So I'm willing to hedge up quite a bit, even though it will have a bit of a lower floor in these decks. But I would say that this is a 6 that can play up.
Yeah, I like it as a 6.
All right, so let's keep it going. Ashling Flame Dancer, 4 mana for a 4/4 legendary shaman. You don't lose unspent mana as steps and phases end. And it also has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, discard a card, then draw a card. If this is your second time with this ability, has resolved this turn, it'll deal 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. If it's the third time, you add 4 red mana. It's got a good rate on its own. The not losing mana in phases is cool. And then the Magecraft is just a bonus. This card seems very strong.
Yeah, I mean this is going to be at its best probably in red blue, where you can be casting spells to draw more cards to cast more spells.
Or red black,
Um,
because black is the other draw a bunch of spells color pairing. So like I imagine they'll also have quite a bit of support for this.
yeah, I don't remember if we saw a ton of black card draw.
It
We
might
did
be
see
like
some.
sacrifice, draw a card, things like that.
Yeah.
So it is that color pairing. So there's got to be something. Otherwise, it would just be blue could go with any color to make that deck.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'd have to see if maybe black has the payoffs and blue has the enablers or something like that. But you're probably right. There was definitely some card draw in black.
Rating wise, I like this card a ton. I think it can do a lot of good work given the opportunity. So I would say this is like an 8 for me.
Yeah. It's got the floor is the 4 mana 4/4, which is good on its own. So yeah, I like it as an 8.
Next up, we have the Detective's Phoenix, a 3 mana 2/2 with Bestow. I love Bestow. Flying and Haste. Enchant creature gets +2/+2 and Flying and Haste, and you may cast this from your graveyard using its Bestow ability. That seems sick. Wow, this card is awesome.
It is. The bestow ability is kind of expensive in the sense that you have to collect evidence 6 to
That's
use
okay
it.
though.
I'm fine with that, and it needs to be expensive to have a card like this if it's going to keep coming back from its graveyard.
I love the idea that you just don't even play this for the Bestow cost and then like the ability to play all bestow creatures if you want to is fine, but on this it's almost just an added bonus. I'm fine with a 3 mana 2/2 haster that just continues to come back later in the game to give me that extra reach that I need, and I think that's fantastic. I am in love with this card. I think that this can win games. I'm gonna say 7.5.
What I like about this card is it has the recurring thing that all Phoenixes have, even if it's a little creative here. But even a 2/2 flyer can sometimes be bricked if they just have a big reach creature or a bigger flyer in the late game. But the fact that it comes back bestowing to make something else bigger and flying makes it even a bigger threat late. So I agree that this card's very good. I like it at probably about a 7.5.
Okay, so we're spot on.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to give it an 8, but it didn't quite feel as strong as the last card, so I hedged down a little bit, but I really do love that card. Next up, we have the Eldrazi Line Breaker. We have a 3 mana 3/3 with Devoid and Trample at the beginning of combat on your turn. Target creature you control gains haste and plus X+O until end of turn, where X is the number of Eldrazi's you control. Gains haste is cute.
Yeah, and it can target itself, so 4/3 haste is like kind of the floor on this card.
That seems good.
It's a bit of a weird card in the sense that it's a colorless card, a red card, and kind of a multicolored card all at once. And there's only red in terms of colors in it, but it's devoid, so it's colorless. But the fact that it has that colorless mana symbol makes it a little trickier to cast.
Yeah, it is a little trickier to cast for sure. But I think I'm okay with that. You know, there are a fair number of things that will make that, and Eldrazi spawn tokens will make that. And I feel like that was my number one instinct with this, is not just Eldrazi because they're so expensive, but it gives you a good outlet for all those Eldrazi spawn once you no longer need them for the tokens or to generate mana. So I feel like the problem I have with the spawn decks is there might just be too few payoffs that you draft, right? So you end up with like a plethora of enablers without enough of the payoffs to, you know, Ulamogs or whatever you want to cast, or you just don't see them. So cards like this are a really nice backup to make it so that those are useful.
It's the classic kind of conundrum with the sort of decks where you have those very specific enablers and payoffs, and neither one of them is good without the other.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you get some themes where the cards are still decent on their own, but a lot of times, especially ramp type things like Eldrazi, the cards are just not good without each other. This one is.
Rating wise, what are you thinking?
I like this at a 7. It's just cheap, feral. It's good at any point in the game. You know, it's not the best turn 9 play, but I think it's pretty solid.
All right, I actually agree. I like it at a 7, and I think it has a pretty good, higher ceiling if you have the right deck. Oops. Next up, we have Fanged Flames. That's cool art. It is a 2 mana sorcery with Devoid. It deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that creature or planeswalker would die this turn, exile it instead. So this is just a Devoid version of
Lava Coil?
Lava Coil, thank you. I was like, Flame Coil? Coil Blaze? I don't know. They all sound the same at this point to me in my head. I think I'm getting like, I'm too old. Like everything is just smushing together. The beginning of like dead brain has just started. So, this is premium removal. I will snap this off at an 8.
Agreed, 8. It's actually better than Lava Coil now that I realize, because it hits planeswalkers too.
Yeah. A little less relevant and limited, important. But yeah.
Not that important and limited, but
relevant.
Could come up.
Absolutely. More options are always better than none. One thing I did want to note about cards like this, so is there an argument to be made that our premium removal is no longer an 8, but like a 7.5 or a 7? Because removal, with how good creatures are now and how many resources creatures give you, they come into play with treasures, they come into play with investigation tokens, they come into play with tokens and counters and creatures. I feel like removal is going later in drafts. I'm having tons of premium removal and it just doesn't cut it. I'm wondering if premium removal is no longer what it once was.
That would make me really sad.
But do you know what I'm saying though?
I do know, I do,
Like
and I
there's a
hate it.
reason I'm getting like 3 or 4 murders in a pool, and it's like, and I'm getting them like, 7/8 pick, and then I'm still going like, 3/3 or 4/3 or something, which would have never happened before. 2 murders, and you're just like, oh yeah, baby, let's go 3-0. But it's not like that anymore.
Does feel that way sometimes. I don't know if I'm there yet, but it definitely has started to feel they're not the snap first picks they used to be.
Yeah, the premium 1-for-1s are just starting to not feel like 8s anymore.
That's why they need to print better counter spells, so they can't get those bonuses.
And next up, we've got Flare of Duplication, 3 mana for an instant. You may sacrifice a non-token red creature rather than pay the spell, copy target instant or sorcery. You may choose new copies. It doesn't say that you control, so that's cool. So you can just do it in response to their combat trick, their removal spell, whatever. It's a nice bonus. And copy spells I'm not usually in love with in limited, because you have to have the mana to do both your spell and the copy, but this is their spell too, so it's definitely playable. I don't know that I love it.
Like there's like every few sets there's some version of this, and I don't feel like it ever shows up in limited really.
Yeah, every once in a blue moon, the fact that this has the free option, so that way you can catch your opponent off guard when they're playing around your stuff, or if it's like not needing to hold it open makes it way more versatile, I think. So I like that you don't get got if you didn't hold it up at the right time. So I think that this is playable, but not amazing.
I think it's, yeah, borderline playable.
I'm going to give it a
I'm not
4.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It can certainly be your 23rd playable card if you have some really good removal yourself, and or you can always board it in too if your opponent shows some pretty premium instants and sorceries. All right.
Definitely.
Now we have a Frogmere Enforcer. That's a really cool card type. 7 mana for a prototype 2/2 or a 4/4. The 2/2 cost 4 mana. And affinity for artifacts, it costs 1 less for each artifact you control. Huh.
Despite the way this card looks, the affinity still applies to the prototype cost.
Yes.
Even though the way it's boxed off, it doesn't really look like it does, but it does.
Yeah. I don't know that I love it.
I don't think we've seen. I mean, there's some artifact sub themes here, but I don't think we've seen the sheer quantity of them needed for a vanilla 4/4 to be good just because it has affinity, like
Yeah,
Mirror
like
Enforcer was in Mirrodin.
I feel like you're happy ish if you're getting like 3 artifacts on the board. 4 artifacts, you're pretty happy, but then it's still just a vanilla 4/4. Like, it's certainly playable if you are deep into artifacts, but if you're not, then. And even if you are, it's like not like woohoo.
Don't get me wrong, I love the design that they managed to combine Frogmite and Mirror Enforcer into the same card somehow with the prototype ability, but just not quite there.
This is a split card. It feels like a 1 and like a 5.
There's no huge upside to this card, like
Exactly.
you said. Yeah. It's playable sometimes. That's about it.
Yeah, I feel like it's like the best case scenario is that you're going to get like a 4/4 for 4, which is just what green and like most other colors are doing now. And then, or a 4/4 for 3, which is like good, but you're also risking worse. So I don't know.
I think also people tend to forget, like when this was first printed in Mirrodin, there were artifact lands in those sets. It made it a lot easier to get affinity.
That's true. That's true. Rating wise, did you like the 1/5?
I did.
All right. Furnace Hellkite. We have a 7 mana dragon, 5/5 affinity for artifacts. Now that is worth casting. 5/5 flyer with fire breathing. So it gets +1/+0 for 1 red. This is much different. I believe I would even say that this is like playable outside of the affinity decks, because with living weapons and other things, like I don't think it's unrealistic to get like 1 or 2 off of this in a more reasonable amount of decks, and a 5/5 flyer is nothing to sniff at for 6 mana.
Agreed. I'm not happy if I have to play this for 7, but it's also not the end of the world because if I'm late in the game, a 5/5 flyer is still good.
And there's a fair number of treasures, clues, investigatey things now in the set where it's pretty reasonable. And again, the living weapons we saw in every single color so far seemed all very playable.
Is that the new technical term, investigating things?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot, and I am confident that a good number of decks can expect to have n, 2 to 3 artifacts, and one of them can be on board some reasonable amount of time. So I like this card well enough. I think this is like a 5 with some big upside in an affinity deck. It can be like a 7 or even an 8.
I think I'm starting a little bit higher at like, I don't know, either 6 or 5.5.
I like that.
But I like the ceiling kind of in the same spot.
Yeah, my 5 was just trying to think of like the barest bones kind of situation, which I don't know. I don't know that we're gonna not have enough artifacts to be considering this card. So
Yep.
sounds like we are spot on. Galvanic Discharge. 1 mana for an instant. Choose target creature or planeswalker. You gain 3 energy. Then you may pay any amount of that energy to deal that much damage. So this is just a lightning bolt to a creature or planeswalker, or better.
With one kind of interesting kind of rules timing exception here being that if you target something and they play a combat trick in response so you can't kill it anymore, you can then choose to pay 0. You don't have to pay till after they get that window to respond, so you can at least bank the energy.
Yes, that is neat. Or alternatively, if you have energy in the bank, you could always just, okay, I'll pay 5.
Sure.
So you just
It works
gift
both
them.
ways.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard for them to. They can only save their creature in response to this. I mean, if they get hexproof or indestructible, fine. But in terms of sheer toughness, they can only save it if they can pump it up higher than the amount of energy you have after this 3.
Yeah, so I think this card is fantastic. I would say that this is an 8.
Agreed.
All right. Go premium removal. Ghostfire Slice. 3 mana for an instant with Devoid. It costs 2 less to cast, and if opponent controls a multicolor permanent. Ghostfire Slice deals 4 damage to any target. Instant speed. I like that. 3 mana. I'm fine with it. The -2 is just amazing, and it's any target. It can go face. I love this card.
It's around protection from red because that doesn't really matter, but it does.
Is this another 8?
I think it is.
Excellent. Moving along. Glimpse the Impossible. 3 mana for a sorcery. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. At the beginning of the next end step, if any of those cards remain in exile, you get to put a O1 Eldrazi card, put them into your graveyard, and create an O1 Eldrazi spawn for each card put into the graveyard. This way, those tokens can sacrifice for a land. 3 mana for a you may pay those cards this turn is a little tight.
Agreed. We've been used to seeing until the end of your next turn recently.
Yeah, or it's 2 cards, 2 mana, but
Yep.
it is play not cast, so you can hit a land off of this and play a little bit more. So this is more late game oriented than the previous ones. Hopefully the dogs will stop barking. Sorry, YouTube. Hopefully your dogs aren't gonna get mad at me. I'm sorry.
I'm just having a tough time like pulling my eyes away from the art on this card. That is frightening.
It is. That said, I still like this card well enough. I doubt that I'm cutting one of these. I'm gonna say this is like a 6. Even a little bit more. I like that you have the Eldrazi backup, so I like it at a 6 or a 6.5.
Interesting. I'm a little lower on it. If I'm in the deck that wants the Eldrazi tokens, I'm with you, but otherwise I'm always lower on these type of cards. They tend to get cut for me. I tend to put this around like a 5.
Interesting. I love card draw in not blue.
I just like blue.
Fair. Next up, we have the Infernal Captor. 4 mana for a 3/3 Devil Rogue with Exploit. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice a creature. If you did, in fact, sacrifice a creature, you get to gain control of target artifact or creature until end of turn. Untap that permanent and it gains haste. It's a nice option. A 3/3 for 4 mana is never where I want to be. I would need some sack outlets or something cute, or maybe board this in knowing that they have got something cute. I'm pretty not happy with these kinds of effects in my typical deck. Now if I have a bunch of Eldrazi spawns and it's like kind of free, then sure, but I'm still saying that this is like a 4 in the average deck.
I want those spawn tokens, exact outlets, or to be like the most aggressive of aggressive decks and use this kind of as a finisher
Yeah.
to,
Sometimes I
to steal.
consider the steals as like a top end, even though they're 3 mana, but that's exactly what they are.
To just, basically they're expecting to be able to block two things
Mm-hmm.
of your three and take 3 damage, and now all of a sudden it's 4 attackers to 1 blocker and they're dead.
Yeah, and they're taking, way more. So yeah, I agree. It's kind of the nice top end, but still, the average deck, I think it's a 4.
Agreed.
All right. Next, we have the Inventor's Axe, 1 mana for a flash equipment. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. The Inventor's Axe enters the battlefield, attach it to a creature you control. So 1 free equip. And then its equip gets +2/+0. And you have to pay 2 energy to equip it. I don't like the pay energy to equip.
I'm only playing this card if for some reason I want a combat trick for +2/+0. Or I really want like artifacts sitting in play.
Yeah, I feel like in these colors, there's really good energy stuff. There's really good artifact stuff. So, like, those things I'm all fine with, but I would need a lot of them to convince me to still run this because I'm assuming if I'm heavy in the energy deck, I'm going to have better things to do with that energy than dump it into equipping over and over again.
If I don't, I should be in a different deck.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if I have a good amount of both of these things kind of jammed into the same deck, like I have solid energy support and I also have like the Dragon Hellkite and a few other things like that, I would put this in only because it equips once for free. So even if it just kind of is sort of dead a little in the middle, that's okay with me. Rating wise, I still don't love it. I would say that this is like a 4.
Agreed. It's just barely playable if you have the synergies.
Great. Next we have Mog Mob. This is
Say
3.
that. Say that 3 times
Yeah,
fast.
but you have 3 Mog Fanatics stapled together. Red
great.
for a 3/3. You can sacrifice it and it deals 3 damage divided as you choose among any 1, 2, or 3 targets. I think that's cool. It's really hard to cast in limited, but I'm a sucker for flavor, so
They did this with
the elf.
was it Llanowar Elves? Right? I'm trying to remember the name of the card. It was
It was visionary. No. Yeah, I don't remember.
yeah, it was just three. Is it 3 mana, green, 3/3 that tap for
Green. Yeah.
Yeah. Remember lots of memes on what the name of that card should be.
Yeah, definitely. So what are you thinking rating wise?
This card's pretty good.
It's hard to
3 mana, 3/3.
cast.
Admittedly, I was about to get there. Admittedly, very hard to cast, at least on turn 3, certainly. But chance to pick off 2 things. You're unlikely to be able to pick off 3, but you can 2-for-1 with this. You can finish off stuff after combat. It makes combat math a nightmare for your opponents.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes face.
Sure.
You could always attack and then just fling it at them and good to go. You win the game that way sometimes. Rating wise, I think it's fine. If it were like red, one red, I'd be a lot happier. So I'm going to kind of hedge my bets here and give this like a 5.5. I think it is a little steep on the requirements.
I'll say 6, but I acknowledge the casting cost is tough.
Next up, we have the Molten Gatekeeper. We've got 2 in a red for a 2/3 golem. It's an artifact, relevant. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and it has Unearth. I like the reach. I like the artifact. It's got okay stats to go with it, and I'm here for this card. I actually like this more than the Mog Fanatic. I'm going to say this is a 6.
The Unearth cost being so cheap is nice, since you need other creatures to also come in that turn. Otherwise, it'd be tough to get any sort of reach out of this card on the Unearth side. But since it's only 1 mana, that's fine. I like it kind of about the same as the last card. I think the last card is a more powerful card, but the Mogmob, but the casting cost puts them kind of at the same for me. So I've got a 6 for both.
Okay, next up, the Party Thrasher, 2 mana for a 1/4. Non-creature spells you cast from exile have Convoke. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may discard a card. If you do, exile the top 2 cards of your library, and then you may choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. I think the rate is fine. I don't think that the Convoke is going to be super relevant, but there, like we saw the 3 mana spell, right? That put the cards into your exile.
That, yeah, it's mostly that and this feeding itself.
Yeah, so I think things like that are kind of neat. It's a fine rate on its own.
No complaints with this card. It's red's,
It's slow, but
yeah, it's red's kind of card draw. Discard to. It's filtering because you only get one, but
yeah, but you're
that's
getting
their
rid of your
version of it.
lands, right? So it's like
Sure.
it is card advantage in my brain, even though it is not more cardboard. It is just better cardboard selection, and removing lands is key. So
I like this card at. I think it's better than the last couple cards. I'll get it like a 6.5, maybe a 7 if you have enough good non-creature spells in your deck.
yeah, I was kind of hedging up to 7, honestly. I think that the discardability is fine. I think the rate is fine. So I was kind of giving it that little extra half point bump because I think the ceiling is quite high.
True, it is.
Phyrexian Ironworks, 3 mana for an artifact. Whenever you attack, make an energy, and you can pay 3 energy to create a 3/3, activate only as a sorcery. Yeah, I like these long-term gains for your other energy requirements. It has a nice energy sink, and if you end up with a lot of energy stuff, which there are some, there's like a vehicle that makes it every single time it taps, you can just pump out an army, and I think that's super cool. Rating-wise, what do you think?
I wish this gave me at least some energy when I entered the battlefield, but that might just be too good, especially if it gave enough to um, allow itself to make a 3/3 right away. You need the support, but I think we'll get there. I don't know if
Yeah.
this. Do you think this is good? Is this big enough to be a split card?
Um, I think it is, but I don't think it needs it because it does make energy on its own. So
Sure.
I'm happy to just like sort of give it 1 and then say it's got high ceiling with the energy deck. You play it pre-combat, you're going to get 1 energy every 3 attacks. You get a free 3/3, which is cool. And then if you have any bonuses, then great. So I don't think it's great, but I think I'm going to try to run it in most decks because I feel like any red deck will either want energy or artifacts or some combination of both, and I think it fits the bill for what red wants to do. So I feel like I'm playing this a solid number of times, and I'm going to say it is a 6.
I think I'm right in that 5 to 6 range. I'll go with you on 6.
I feel like if this was in a different color, I would be in the like 4 to 5 range, but I feel like
Sure.
this is so what red is looking for.
Yeah, and it's an artifact that makes artifacts, so
Yep. Power balance. We have red for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may reveal a top card of your library. If you do, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost if the 2 spells have the same mana value. Wow, you get to play war in Magic.
counterbalance this is not. Mainly because since it's in red, you don't get the top of your library manipulation that blue gets.
Yeah, now I'm not into this. It also says cast instead of play, so lands don't work. I don't know.
Yep.
This doesn't feel like a good gamble to me. I'm gonna say it is a 2, and I'm only giving it an extra 1 point because it looks kind of fun.
It does. It's probably a very fun card.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's a very good card. I'm with you at 2.
All right, moving on. All right. We are recording again. Ready to go?
Yep.
Next up, we have Ral and the Implicit Maze. 5 mana for a saga. Chapter 1. It'll deal 2 damage to each creature and planeswalker your opponents control. Cute, cute. Also, Chapter 2, you may discard a card. If you do, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them until the end of your next turn. Nice. And Chapter 3, create a Spell Gorger Weird Token. Yeah, I love that card. It was one of my favorite cards from like Core 20 or 19 or whatever. It's a 3 mana, which I don't know why we need that, but sure. 2/2 weird that says it gets +1/+1 counter every time you cast a non-creature spell. Permanent prowess, let's go. Love that card. Huh.
This card's pretty good.
I think so.
I don't know. I haven't played the format yet. I don't know how impactful a 2 damage sweeper is, but as long as it hits something, it's not hitting any air stuff, so.
And then it's going to give you your cards back, and then you can also use those cards to trigger your free Spellgorger Weird. I think this card's fantastic.
Oh,
it's a
true.
little
That
slow, but
that second one is until the end of your next turn, unlike the one we saw earlier.
yeah, it's a little slow, but each piece of the value I think is worth it, and then some. So I'm very high on this card, actually.
The only real question I have is just for being 5 mana, just does that first part matter? Like, are you basically taking a turn off by playing it?
I feel like you're always going to get something, so
Probably.
I'm still very, very happy with this. I'm probably way too high on it, but I'm going to say 7.5.
Definitely lower than that. I still like this card, and I'm not cutting it. I think I've got it at 6.5.
Nice. Reckless Pyrosurfer, 2 mana for a 2/2 with haste and landfall. When it enters the battle, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, this gains Battle Cry until end of turn. Whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each interest of each instance of Battle Cry, so it can trigger multiple times. So if you have one of your like sack lands that searches for land, you get double Battle Cry, which is cool.
Yeah.
This is
Somehow,
some huge upside for a bear.
somehow in finding 74 mechanics when I went through the set, I missed Battlecry.
Wow,
So that's 75 mechanics.
You missed it because it was buried in landfall.
I know. There were a few of those, and I caught most of them the second time I went through the list, but missed this one.
Wow. So there's actually 75. We've been telling people the wrong information this whole time. You're fired. You're fired, Yanks.
Oh. Join Veggie in the group of people that get fired all the time.
You're the original. What do you mean?
Fair.
Rating wise, I think this is a great bear with some really good upside. I'm going to give this a 6.5. I think this is really cool.
Agreed. The fact that you can get those multiple landfall triggers from those sack lines in this set is really nice.
And they in red, there's with the Eldrazi spawns and all sorts of stuff. There's a chance that you just top deck a land and get to alphas. Like every land becomes a mini trumpet blast. That's so cool for red.
Definitely, it just turns creatures that are bricked and can't do anything into actual threats. Even if it's only for a turn, sometimes that's enough that they have to spend resources to deal with them or trade with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So rating wise, what do you like it as?
I like it as a 6.5, partly just because I don't like trumpet blast effects, even if they're on creatures. But
I was a 6.5, and I love trumpet blast effects, so I'm surprised you're that high on it.
I feel like this is a card that I'm going to lose a lot of games to.
Yeah.
I would probably never win a game with this card, but I will lose a lot of games to this card.
Yeah, I love it. Next up, we have 2 mana Replicate. Pay 3 energy. When you cast this, copy it for each time you played it, and then it will deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So if you have extra energy, you can just chain lightning bolt things. That's cool.
You don't get to hit players, but otherwise it's lightning strike that just sometimes you get to cast a second time. Or a third.
It's not instant, though.
Oh, true.
This card seems like a bit of a split rating for me. I think it's like a 6 and an 8.
I don't think for me I'm having this as a split rating, just because I think I'm pretty high on it to start. Just 2 manage, deal 3. I'll play that. Even if it's sorcery speed, I'll play that in every deck. I think I've got this at like 7, just flat 7.
I feel like I feel like we are actually exactly the same. I was just saying that like my 6 is if I have no energy, and then my 8 is if like it is in the energy deck. So it's like it sounds like we're pretty much exactly the same. You just hedged your bets for like the middle performance, which is fair.
Sure.
All right. What the heck is this?
Cute.
Sparpadin?
Sarpadian.
Sarpadian. Sarpadian?
Sar,
Sarpadian?
Sar, Sarpadia was one of the empires in the Fallen Empire story.
Ah, okay, okay. Sarpadian Simulacrum, 1 mana for a 1/1 with haste. 4 mana, you can sacrifice it. It'll deal 4 damage to target creature. It's an artifact, so affinity for artifacts is cool. There's Convoke in the set. And then when it's no longer useful, you can just throw it at someone's face. At a creature's face. I think that's okay. I would have to have some synergy to want a 1/1 for 1, even with haste, but I don't think it'll be hard for me to find that. So this is like probably like a 4 with some upside in the right deck.
I think that's right. And this is a card you can always stick in as your 23rd card because it
Yeah.
does double as just a 5 mana removal spell. And you're not thrilled with that, but it is playable.
Yeah. It's also, maybe it's closer to a 5. I like the idea that it doesn't have to tap to use its ability. So you can still like tap it, affinity for artifacts, like Convoke, and then just like throw it.
Yep, improvise. There's a few things that'll be relevant there.
Yeah, so that's cool. So yeah, closer to a 5. What are you thinking?
5 is where I like it.
Siege Smash. 2 mana for an instant split second. You get to choose one. Destroy an artifact or target creature gets +2/+0 and gains +3/+2 and gains trample till end of turn. I like that it has the artifact removal like stapled on. I would play this. This is a 5 for my red decks.
Seems like a very random card to just put split second on.
Yeah, they probably were just trying to like. It's probably like a mini game. How many mechanics can we put in the set? Let's list all 75 of them, and then let's just kind of tack them on wherever like set design allows.
Maybe it's that I don't call back to something from like Time Spiral Block when they had split second that I don't recognize. In which case I would get it, but I mean, sure, the card's fine. Just a basic combat trick and a free artifact removal spell. Yeah, I'm lower on it than you, but I always am on combat trick, so I have it at like a 4.
Sounds about right. Next up, we have the Skittering Precursor. 3 mana for an Eldrazi drone, 3/3 with Devoid and Menace. Okay, I like these stat lines already. Whenever you sacrifice a non-token permanent, you get to create an Eldrazi spawn, which is nice. There's a decent number of things that will make you sacrifice. There are things your opponents can do to make you sacrifice. There was creature edicts and things. So it is just a thing that will happen some number of times, which is cool. And I like a 3/3 menace for 3 for red. So I like this card. It's like a 6.
I'm mostly just playing this card straight up without the last ability.
Yeah.
And if I get it, it's a bonus. 6 seems right.
Next up, we have Sokoa?
Skoa, I'm guessing.
At first I wanted to say Sokka, but that's not quite right. I wish it was. Sokoa Ember Mage, 6 mana for a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, deal 4 damage to any target. Done playing it. And discard another card. Name this. Sacrifice 2 mountains. Deal 4 damage to any target. So it can kill 2 things.
There's a lot of weird things about this card. First off, that it's a common legend.
Yeah.
Something we don't see a ton of outside of commander sets.
That is weird.
No, I think the reasoning for that is they wanted to play your minigame, as you said a couple cards ago, and get Grandeur in here somewhere. And Grandeur traditionally has only ever been on Legends. It's an ability designed to take advantage or reduce the punishment of drawing too many copies of a Legend.
And it's common, so that's kind of cool. You can sacrifice it and sacrifice 2 mountains. That's awfully steep, but...
It is, and that's a callback to Fire Blast, because that's what that card does for 6 mana. Or sacrifice 2 mountains.
The creature by itself, even if you just have it, is pretty cool. And you're not planning on doing any of the discarding stuff. I think that I'm still probably playing this. I think this is a neat card.
I am too. The Grandeur cost seems really steep, but I think back to Fire Blast itself, like I think I would fairly often play a 6 mana deal 4 to anything that has the option to play it for free by sacking 2 mountains, which is basically what that is, right? It's discard it, sack 2 mountains, which is the same thing as playing it for free.
Yeah.
So while it sounds really expensive, it's still pretty strong.
And a lot of times you don't need to do anything. You can just trade this off and then just recast it.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
then you don't have to worry about any of that. Like, your opponents still need to deal with a 4/4 at some point. Like, the set doesn't seem overly large. So, rating wise, for a common, depends on how many 6 drops, right? Like, if I have a lot, I don't think that this is a home run, but I'm going to say it's like a 6. I think it's cool.
I like it as a 6. I like the fact that not only does the grand durability help mitigate drawing too many legends, it also just mitigates having too many 6 drops.
Yeah.
Like it lets you put a few extra big cards in your set in your deck if they're copies of this.
Yeah, but you have to get it onto the battlefield before that works. So
True,
if you're
but it
having
makes
trouble
it,
hitting
yeah,
6, then
that's fair. That's fair.
so I'm hesitant to give it that credit because I've already proven that I can play it. So
True.
I do
I
like
think
that you can do it at instant speed, which is cool too. So you can be like tapped out and just deal 4 to a thing.
I mean, also, if you have 2 of these in your hand and 6 mana, you've just dealt 8 to them, theoretically.
Yeah.
Like to their face. That might just win the game.
Yep, absolutely. So rating wise, I like it as a 6.
Agreed.
All right, next up we have the Smelted Charge Bug, 2 mana for a 1/3 with Menace. When it enters, you get 2 energy. When it attacks, you may pay an energy. If you do, it gets +1/+0 and gains Menace until end of turn. It's fine. I don't know that I want to use the energy on itself, but I like that it makes energy. It's an artifact. It's a decent stat creature. Kind of does what red wants to do.
So it gives other attacking creatures menace, which is pretty nice.
Target attacking creature. Oh, that's a little bit better. I assumed it was itself. Yeah, I misread that. Yeah, a larger creature getting menace is cool. But the bug does have to attack, which makes it a little like that means your bug's just dead.
Yeah, the bug already has menace, so at least it's a little bit harder to deal with.
Yeah. Oh, the bug. Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting tired. Rating wise, I think it's like a 5.
Agreed. There are better energy payoffs, but I don't mind having one that the cost is only 1 energy.
Next up, Spawn Gang Commander, 5 mana for a 2/2 Goblin Eldrazi with Devoid. When you cast this spell, create 3 0/1 Eldrazi spawn creature tokens. You can pay 1 and a colorless Eldrazi mana, and you can sacrifice an Eldrazi, and it'll deal 2 damage. So it's just a Siege Gang Commander taken over by Spaghetti Mommy.
Yep.
So I love that you can refill your Eldrazi slingshot pretty easily in this set. There's plenty of spawns to throw.
True, I didn't really think about the fact that you could also just be making these elsewhere.
There's times where Siege Gang Commander has been reprinted in like her modern sets, and Goblins was like not really a strong supported draftable archetype, whereas here that is just not the case. And Siege Gang Commander was good on its own. It didn't really need extra goblins, but here you actually have them.
Agreed. And also one minor upside to this card is that you get the spawn regardless of whether or not this gets countered, because it's a cast trigger for some, I guess because Eldrazi like cast triggers.
Cute, cute, cute. I love that. I didn't even notice. Rating wise, what are you thinking?
I don't think it's quite as good as Siege Gang just because of the sacrifice cost is harder. But it's still very good. I like to set like a 7.
Yeah. I can go 7, 6.5. It's still a little expensive for the stats you're putting on the board, and if you don't have Eldrazi spawn to back it up, like more of them, then it's a little less exciting, but I think it is certainly not something I'm cutting.
No, that's true, because you are making 0/1s, not 1/1s.
Yeah. Next up, we have the Thriving Skyclaw. 4 mana for a 3/2 flyer. When it ATBs, you get some energy, 3 of them. When it attacks, you may pay 3. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's a 4/3 on its own for 4 mana. It's not bad. It's a fine stat line. It's also a cat dragon, so it just gets like a cool point there. It's a good energy outlet if you have like good energy creation. I don't mind sticking them onto a flyer as counters.
3 is an expensive energy payoff, but you're getting a lot here because like you said, it's on a flyer.
Mm-hmm. And this is the nice thing about this one is like sometimes the energy that it gives you and what it asks for is like doesn't line up. It's like it gives you 2 and it needs 3 or whatever. This is just you don't need any other energy. Like if you have more and you could throw it on there, great. But by the time you do, it might be dead anyway. So or you've already won because you have a 4 power. So like this doesn't feel like it needs energy. And if you are using more, it's kind of like win more, if that makes sense.
It does.
Because it feels like your 4 powered flyer is living, which means you are probably winning.
Yeah, for sure.
So rating wise, I like this card. I would still play this. Double red, not happy with, but it's fine. And probably playing this at like a 6.
6 is where I have it.
Seems like a solid 4 to me. Unstable Amulet. 2 mana for an artifact. When it enters, you get 2 energy. When you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, it'll deal 1 damage to each opponent. You pay 2 energy, tap it, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card from exile this turn. That's a really good mana sink if you have energy.
It is. It's effectively draw a card.
Yeah, you just pay 2 mana, draw a card, basically. You may play it until you exile another card with this. Yeah. Oh, okay. So you just get to keep it forever. So yeah, it's just 2 mana, draw a card.
And you can do it at the end of your opponent's turn if you have to. Like, you don't have to. It's not as a sorcery or anything like that.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter though because you can. It doesn't go away at the end of the next turn either. You just keep it until you play it.
True.
So that's kind of neat. So, and then if you have other things that let you draw more cards, I'm probably still not playing this on its own unless I'm very affinity for artifacts, unless I have more energy. So, but I feel like red will have some combination of both of those things. So this seems playable. It's like a 5 on average.
Yeah, I think it's a 5. I think it's got a lot of upside, but you're right. There are going to be decks that this kind of just maybe replaces itself and does nothing else.
Yeah, maybe gives you like 1 off on your like 1 of Hellkites that just happen, you happen to be in that situation. Next up, the Void Pouncer. 2 mana for a 1/3 with the Void and Kicker 3. If the Void Pouncer was kicked, it enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it and a trample counter with haste. That's a nice little late game bonus. It is hard to cast, so you do need to make sure you have that colorless mana, but I like the flexibility on this.
So it's a 2 mana single color 3/1 or basically a 5 mana multicolor 5/3 haste trampler. It seems pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is fine. I would say this is like a 5.
I think so. We've seen enough things that kind of like having Eldrazi stuff around that maybe that alone helps. And I like the flex. Any 2-drop that has the flexibility of being played late game and still being relevant gets some bonus points for me. So maybe I've got it a little bit higher, like at 5.5.
Okay. Next up, the Wheel of Potential. 3 mana for a sorcery, get 3 energy, then you may pay X energy. Each player exiles their hand and draws X cards. If X is 7 or more, you may play cards you own from exile until the end of your next turn.
So this is part of that cycle of old throwback cards that use energy to balance out previously broken cards, in this case, Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah. So you exile your hand, and then if you dumped a lot of mana, if you completely wheeled yourself and your opponent, you can then also cast your cards. I don't like this card.
It's not great, because if you're willing to dump your hand, you probably aren't that excited about the cards that you now get to play anyway.
Yeah,
and unless you can play them all right away.
Most of the time, especially in red, it's really easy to just wait until you have no cards.
Yeah, now if you're just in the market for a straight, like if you have enough energy and you're in the market for Wheel of Fortune, sure.
Yeah, I don't want to be in the market of Wheel of Fortune. I don't want to spend all of my resources that I've built up to give me and my opponent a new 7.
I generally don't either, but there are just the aggressive decks that are down to 2 cards while your opponent's holding 6, and you do this for 4, and now they've gone from 6 to 4, and you go from 2 to 4.
Yeah.
because both teams only draw the number of X. I mean, technically, you could just pay 3 mana, pay 0 energy, and discard exile both players' hands.
And it's like nothing from you and their whole 4 or 5 cards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you only really want that in a very aggressive deck, and I don't know how many of those decks are going to be producing enough energy. But
It still doesn't make me happy.
no, I mean you spent mana, a card, and potentially energy to give both players the same number of resources. Sounds bad unless you're starting from a point where you have way fewer.
Yeah. So rating wise, I'm gonna say it has its uses. I'm gonna say it's like a 4.
Would you say it has potential?
Where did you wheel that joke from, Yanks? I'm not very good at the puns. Sorry. 4. Final answer.
I think I've got this as a 5, but I feel like I'm going to probably draft this card every time I see it and try to make it work.
We are very different humans, friend. Next up, we have the Cursed Mirror. We have a 3 mana red artifact, taps for a red. When it enters the battlefield, you may have it come in as a copy of a creature on the battlefield until the end of turn, except it has haste. Until the end of turn. So just one time. You get to clock them with something big, and then it's a mana rock?
Basically. Or maybe you get to use some sort of ability.
Affinity for artifacts, things like that. That is fine if you're in the market for artifacts or ramp. Like, if your deck has like 3 Hellkites in it, this is probably pretty good, right? It like subtracts the cost of them by 2.
Definitely. I think you need to be in the market for some sort of synergy with this card rather than it just being itself good.
4.
4 sounds good.
Next up, we have a Fledgling Dragon, 4 mana for a 2/2 with Flying and Threshold. When you have 7 cards in your graveyard, it gets +3/+3 and has Fire Breathing. Yeah. This is an old reprint. 2/2 for 4 mana is just not floating my boat right now. It's not.
Yeah, power levels changed a lot from Judgment.
Yeah. So you need to have like if we're Rakdos, if we're like self-milling, sacrificing, drawing cards and discarding, then I think this is good, but I think the average deck is going to be pretty low on this.
Agreed. It's past its time. It never grew up.
Poor little baby. It's past its time. He barely had a chance. I'm going to say that this is like a 4. It's a playable card, but it's going to get cut more often than not.
Sounds good to me. 4.
All right. Hey, this is a new card. Why are you reprinting this already?
It's not that new, is it? I feel like I've seen this card in Vintage Cube for years now.
Well, I'm old, so yeah, everything from like, I don't know, 2015 is new to me.
Fair.
Lelia the Blade Reforged, 3 mana for a 2/2 with haste. When it attacks, exile top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever one or more cards are put into exile from your library and or your graveyard, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this card. Seems good. It's a 3/3, tax for 3, gives you card advantage. This card is a banger. I mean, you need to get in the first attack, but then it starts to pace up with you. So as long as you can get that first attack in, then it's pretty cool and safe. And 7.5.
This card's great. It's play that card, lets you hit lands. Probably not on turn 3, but you're still happy to play it on turn 3 just because it starts growing. 7.5 sounds good.
Next up, we've got Meltdown. X and a red. Destroy each artifact with mana value X or less. This is a 2. It's a sideboard card for artifact X, which is a thing.
This is most likely in this set for one reason, and that's because it's like a $15 uncommon from Urza Saga. So people need it for sideboards.
That makes sense, and it's a sideboard here, so 2.
Yep. 2.
All right, next up we have the Meteoric Mace. 6 mana for a +4/+0 and trample, equip 4 with Cascade. It's a big Cascade cost. The equip's a little expensive. I don't want to say it's not playable, but also probably not making the cut in most of my stuff.
Cascade cards are weird just because you kind of want them to have a higher
Yeah.
mana cost for the Cascade to be better, but you also then need the card to do something unless you're putting it in a combo deck. So
Plus 4+0 in travel is like no small feat. So I feel like there are like, 16 to 19 creature decks in which I will still run this, especially in red because it's an artifact, and Cascades, no joke, it can give you some really good value and card advantage. So this is gonna see some play. I'm gonna say that this is like a 5. I'm gonna play it sometimes, but not super often.
sounds good to me. Right around that 5.
Next up, we've got Fury, 5 mana for a 3/3 with double strike. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of creatures or planeswalkers. I'm here for that. A 3/3 double striker that can like pew 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 kill 2 to 3 things. I think that's nice.
Yeah, this card's great. And it's not being abused like it is in constructed formats, but it's still fantastic.
8.
8 sounds good to me.
Next up, we have our modals. We have a 2/2 with prowess. When it enters battlefield, return instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, I love it. It's a 7.
Because it's got a land attached to it.
And it comes with a free card.
Oh yeah, it's a good card anyway. But it also has a land attached to it.
And it's a land on the back, which means it's free.
Hey.
So it's probably like an 8.
Yeah.
That seems like one of the better ones. Now
It does.
Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. It does seem like one of the better ones in the modals we've seen.
Ral Monsoon's Mage. Sorry. 2 mana for a 1/3. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell during your turn, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Ral deals 1 damage to you. If you win the flip, you may exile him. If you do, return him as the Leyline Prodigy. I love that. That's super cute. That's a fun mechanic. And embraces is it. Let's go. I love the coin flip side. When he enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on him for each instant and sorcery you've cast this turn, which has to be at least 1.
Yes.
Because that's how he flips. So he's at least a 3/3. Until your next turn, instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. That's just what he does on the other side. That's a rip off. For -2, how do you get worse at doing something? -2, it deals 2 damage as you divide it among 1 or 2 targets. Draw a card if you control a blue permanent other than Ral. Easy, let's go. And then you can -8, exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may cast instant and sorcery spells from among them without paying their mana cost. This is the weakest of the planeswalkers we've seen so far.
I would agree. It doesn't make anything. It only gets you some card advantage once if you have other blue things. The ultimate's good, but ultimates on planeswalkers are always good, so.
It can only do 2 damage divided 1 time before it just dies. I would rather this thing just stay a creature.
Yeah. Other than the fact that if you keep casting instant sorcerers as a creature, if you keep losing flips, it kills you.
Yeah, this thing is this is a 5. I'm not gonna cut it, but like,
Agreed. I think the best part about this card as a planeswalker is that it's a planeswalker, so it scares people, so they'll devote resources to killing it, even though they shouldn't.
I was really excited when I saw the first half. I liked the coin flip, and I was like, oh, he flips into a pile of poop.
The coin flip's a fun throwback to the original Ral Zarek from it was Dragon's Maze, where the ultimate was flip 5 coins for every head. You take an extra turn. That was a little more impactful.
Poor Ral. They did you dirty, my friend. I'm sorry. Sorry. What do you think rating-wise? 5?
5. I'm not, like you said, not cutting it, but not thrilled that this is my mythic planeswalker.
Sundering Eruption, 3 mana, destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield. Tap, then shuffle. Creatures without flying cannot block. It's free?
Yeah.
6?
Exactly. I mean, sometimes some formats you're in the market for that. Creatures can't block this turn in the right deck, or creatures out flying. So here you just kind of get that effect for free and maybe mess with their mana if they have like a dual end to blow up or something.
or they're using those one to make colorless land, and you just get to ruin their
Yep.
colorless dreams. But also,
True.
like, the ability, the creatures without flying cannot block, is a haymaker that can win games. The problem is it's so situational that it's never worth a card because it's just dead too often. Now it doesn't matter because it's a land and it's free. So now that ability becomes a game-ending card that you did not have to pay for. So 6.
6 is right.
Next up, we have... No, we're done.
Green
Yay.
cards.
Next up, we have green cards. Come back and see us. Don't forget to check out Cool Stuff Inc. and grab that Eldrazi Spawn token in your pre-order before the set comes out because you know you want to. It's very cute and it supports the stream. Yanks, thanks for coming.
Anytime.
You excited about green?
Not usually, but we'll see. Sometimes green with Eldrazi stuff can be kind of funky.
Yeah. Guys, leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you thought of red, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.